Hello, this video is on ethical issues and how to deal with them. So, what are ethics? These are basically a system of morals and rules about how to behave and what we believe is right and wrong in particular circumstances. So, in terms of psychology, it's essentially what can we do with our participants and not do with our participants so that we are being ethical, we're treating them right. So we want to treat our participants right because we want them to still take part in our studies. So there are there's 5 ethical issues technically, and then there's one which is the way of dealing with the ethical issues, which is debriefing. A lot of people get confused with that. So I'm going to go through them one by one and then show you some exam questions. So the first one, you don't have to call it the first one, just one of the ethical issues is all participants should agree to participate in your research. That's the consent part, but they've also got to be informed, so they need to know what they're agreeing to. So you've got to tell them the aim of the study. If you don't tell them the aim of the study, then you can't get informed consent. And if there's any children, you need to get parental consent. So we must make sure that our participants have agreed to take part and they know what they're taking part in. Otherwise, it becomes an ethical issue that we then need to do something about to get rid of that issue. Another one is deception. So we can't lie to our participants about the aim of the study. We've got to tell them the real aim. But if we do lie to them, and there's some instances where that's important because we don't want them to, show demand characteristics, which is where they've guessed what it's about. And if you tell them, they're obviously going to know what it's about and they'll change the behaviour to please or displease the researchers. So we don't want them to change the behaviour, we want them to be natural. So sometimes we might lie to them because then we don't want to change the behaviour, but we must deal with that afterwards because it's an ethical issue. Now we can lie about the true aim. We can also lie about our identity as researchers. If we dress up as somebody else, again, we're deceiving the person there. So it's an ethical issue. Confidentiality is another ethical issue. So we've got to make sure that we keep all the data that we collect from participants private and confidential, so we don't share it with anybody else and nobody knows how the participant has behaved in your study. So there's no names or anything like that. And oftentimes, if we need to have an identifier of our participant, we'll give them a code number so that we can still find them in the data if they want to withdraw later, but that we don't know who it is, because that would be sharing someone's results publicly. They might be quite embarrassed and that might affect them in that way. So confidentiality is also an ethical issue. Another one is that we've got to allow our participants to leave whenever they want without penalty. So if a participant comes to your study and they've changed their mind and they don't want to do it anymore, you should be telling them that they have a right to withdraw so that they can leave whenever they want. If you don't tell them, that's an ethical issue because they don't realise then that they can leave. And also, as part of right to withdraw, they should be allowed to remove their data. So if they've gone through the whole study and at the end they've thought, oh, I don't want my data to be in this study, they're allowed to remove that data. So that's why you might want their code name so that you can identify them to remove them. Another one is protection from harm. We can't physically or mentally harm our participants, which is pretty straightforward. We might assess them for any risk factors, like if they've got mental health issues or whatever before the study, just to make sure that we don't have anybody in the study that could be harmed by the study. And then we need to know how to deal with these issues. So a debrief covers kind of all of the ethical issues, because in a debrief, so it's right at the end of the study, you can tell them what the true study was about, so you can get rid of deception and deal with that as an ethical issue. You can signpost them to services like counselling if they've been affected negatively, so it gets rid of protection from harm as an issue. And you can give them a right to withdraw their results, so that gets rid of that issue as well. The only one that debriefing doesn't get rid of as an issue, or doesn't deal with, is the way that they word it in the exam, is informed consent. You can't really, the only way to get informed consent is to ask for consent and tell them the aim of the study. So it wouldn't make sense to use a debrief for that. And I suppose as well with confidentiality, the way to deal with that is to keep everything private. So there's only really those 3, so right to withdraw, protection from harm and deception, that a debrief will deal with. For the other 2, it's just slightly different. So let's have a look at an exam question. So we've got 2 questions here. So describe one ethical issue other than confidentiality that Ellie should consider when carrying out the research into how individuals respond in different social situations. So I've highlighted their social situations because that's the DV, it's the thing that's being measured. That means that we've got to put that in our answer. And I've written out the one for confidentiality. Now the question says other than confidentiality, so you could not write this in the exam, but I just want to show you the kind of the structure of it. So you get a mark for stating the ethical issue. So if we'd done a different one like right to withdraw, protection from harm, informed consent, then we would get a mark for that. And then you get a mark for explaining what that ethical issue is. So in this case, confidentiality means that you don't want other participants to know personal information. And in order to deal with that, you keep it private. And then obviously you've got a sandwich in then that social situations to get it into context. So let me give you another example. Say, for example, we did an ethical issue might be right to withdraw, as participants might not realise that they can leave the study about different social situations at any time. So, for example, if one of these social situations make them feel uncomfortable, they can leave if they want to. So you could word it like that. Or maybe if we do informed consent could be an issue, as participants need to be told that the aim of the study is about different social situations and how individuals respond in that, and they need to agree by saying that they agree. And if there are any children, they need parental consent. So something like that would be describing an ethical issue. So you've got to kind of say what it is, explain in that situation what they're measuring. So in this case, individuals respond in different social situations, how that might be a problem with that ethical issue, and maybe what you would do about it. Although, having said that, there's usually a question like this one, which is about what you do about it. So how would you manage one ethical issue? You'll have noticed that on the assessment, they combine those two together. So they sometimes do that, which is why I was saying it together. So one ethical issue might be right to withdraw. I would make sure that my participants know that they can leave, remove their results about how junk food affects mood at any time, and I would remind them of this in a debrief at the end of the study. So I've put debrief in. I've put that they can leave any time and remove the results, and I've also put it into context. Let's have a look at some other questions. Let's see if I can find any more. So this was the one that was on the assessment. So it was about watching a movie alone or watching it with friends might lead to increased happiness, and what's one ethical issue. So on the mark scheme, it gave a few examples. So you could have had right to withdraw is an ethical issue, and it says how you could deal with it. So we've got by informing participants at the beginning of the experiment that they can stop watching the movie as the context at any time. So we've got 3 marks there. Confidentiality, ensure the responses of the participants are anonymous on the question about happiness, so the happiness bit is the context. Protection from harm, making sure the movie, which is the context, is age appropriate for the students and their friends watching it. So again, another good suggestion for that, because if it's an age inappropriate movie, that might be quite harmful, it might be quite scary or violent or whatever. Informed consent, the students could be debriefed, so we've got a debrief as a way of dealing with it, by telling them after they have watched the films that the study was on happiness, bit of context. And then deception, the students need to be told the real aim of the study is on happiness, so if they'd have lied about what it was about, so they should be debriefed afterwards. So we've mentioned debrief in there. So there's loads of different ones that we could have. They also say that you're not allowed to just say consent, you've got to say informed consent. So just bear that in mind if you're ever talking about informed consent, you can't say just consent. And then this was also the one that we had in the assessment. So Ling is doing a digit span test with different age children, and it says describe one ethical issue, and there was a couple of examples. So Ling should have gained informed consent before conducting their digit span experiments. That's the context. Ling could have done this by writing to the children's parent and asking if they agreed to take part. Or this one says Ling should consider any psychological harm that may result from a study because the children may be embarrassed if they cannot recall many. So the fact that they've used the word recall is about the study, so that would have been in context as well. So there would have been some suggestions. Let's see if there's any other ones. I think these ones are all. Okay, what about this one? So we've got Ellie designs a questionnaire to investigate how individuals respond to different social situations. Elliot asked participants to answer a variety of questions, including, would you put your smartphone away in class if a teacher told you to? Would you stop and help someone who had fallen over? Would you join in drawing graffiti on a wall if your friends were all doing it? Elliot decides to keep the participants' identity anonymous so they cannot be identified. Describe one ethical issue other than... Oh, that's the one that was on my slide, isn't it? I thought it sounded familiar. So yes, that's all the questions that are on ethics. So let's have a look at these little short ones. So we've got Joe wants to conduct a study on childhood trauma and wants to ask quite personal questions. Which ethical issue is this? So this would be protection from harm, because they might be quite distressed talking about their childhood trauma. We've got Usman wants to observe people in a supermarket, decides to dress up as an employee and record the results. Well, this would be deception because they're lying about their identity. And then we've got Melanie works in a school, wants to see if a new teaching strategy works. She isn't going to tell the students as she wants their natural behaviour. So this would be, I'm thinking, informed consent. Oh, and there's two, and right to withdraw. So she can't get informed consent from them because she's not told them that they're in a study, so they can't agree to take part and they don't know that what the aim is. And they also can't leave because it's part of their normal class, so it's not like they can decide not to do it if they don't want to. So we've got a right to withdraw issue there. And there we are. So I hope that that was helpful and that's helped you understand what the ethical issues are, how to deal with them, and the kind of context exam practice.